All right, welcome back, guys. So this will be part two of the lesson 2.2 functions. Um, so far, we introduced the definition of function. We'll look at a few easy examples. I'll do a couple more examples in this video. But another thing we want to talk about in this lesson is introducing the formal notation for a function. Given a formula, given an equation, if it is determined, if it is a function itself, in mathematics, we like to classify or give you a special notation, so that way it is by default that when we know a given equation, we know that it's going to be a function. So what we want to talk about is function notation, right? So we're going to say function notation. Okay. All right. So the function notation is this here. This is the default notation is f parenthesis x. Okay. So this notation, the way we read it, so we pronounce it as f of x, right? Not f times x, f of x. So the x is this here. This acts as, the input for the function, for the equation. So when you see f of x, for example, all right, we may see f parenthesis 3, close parenthesis, we say f of 3. So this means, this here means, okay, plug in 3 for x to find what is the y value. Okay, so example. Okay, so let's say given in an equation, let's say we're given y equal to 4x squared plus 3x. Okay, so suppose this is the equation. Okay, this here will be a function, and we can graph it, and we can do the vertical line tests and make sure there's a function here. We can do that, but we're gonna skip all that stuff. I'm gonna say this is a function. You're gonna have to trust me on this one. So given this here, so we're gonna say this is a function. Okay, so now we can rename this. Let's say rename this, and rename this. Okay, so the dependent variable y can now be renamed any letter you want, but it's gonna have to follow by parenthesis x close parenthesis. So by standard, by default, we use this letter f here, but you can use h, you can use m, you can use p, you can use anything, as long as the letter inside the parenthesis matches the input here. Okay, so let's say my favorite alphabet letter is G, so we can rename this as let's call a y now become the dependent variable, that will become G, and then G is gonna be taking on x value, so it's gonna be G of x. So our equation now just become this. Okay, so our G of x function is just 4x squared plus 3x. Okay, in short, we said G is a function, right? And then x is the input. So sometimes you say, okay, this function g, this function f, this function h, just a short word to refer to this equation. Okay, so let's do some math now. Okay, let's do a. Let's go ahead and find what I want to find the y value. I want to find the y value when x is 2. Okay, so it said find g of 2. Okay, to do this, we're going back to what we defined earlier. So any notation like this here, this means plug in the 2 for x and then figure out what the y is, or work out the math and get the y value. So g of 2 literally means, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and plug the 2 for x, and I'm gonna calculate what the output is gonna be. Okay. So So notice that whenever I plug in a value for x into an equation or formula, I always use a set of parentheses to indicate that's going to be my input that I'm plugging in. It makes a huge difference when we plug in the negative numbers, and I'll do that in the next example here. So anyway, let's do the math. For order operation, we get 2 squared is 4, and then 3 times 2 is 6, so that's 16 plus 6, so that's 22. So in this case here, the order pair we're looking at is x is 2, the x coordinate is 2, the y coordinate is 22. Okay. Another way to write this is 2 comma g of 22, if you want to be fancy. So this is what this math is giving us. Okay. Let's do another example. Okay. Let's do g of negative 5. Okay, so this means let's plug in negative 5 for x. Okay, and when we do this here, we have to indicate that the input we plug in is negative 5, and using the set parentheses we indicate that. So it's gonna be square right here, and if you remember, by order operation, we do exponent first. So negative 5 square parentheses, or the quantity of negative 5 squared, that's going to be positive 25. And then over here is going to be negative 15. And then this is going to be 100 minus 15. So that's 85. Okay. So the order pair we're looking at here is negative 5 for x. Y is going to be 85. Okay. All right. Okay. Sometimes you see another example like this where, you know, it's already confusing than it is, and we want to make things more confusing by asking you to find, let's say, find find g of 3a. Okay, so 3a. Okay, well, if we can do g of negative 5, we can do g of 3a. Well, what the heck does this mean? It means that this thing inside the parentheses, whatever that thing is going to be, this is going to be your input. Okay, so we find out where the x is, we stick that 3a into the x, and then we calculate what the output is going to be. Okay, so our equation is this. Okay, so let's say we got 4 times, or x squared, well, x now, the x is 3a, so we have 3a squared plus 3, and there's another x over there, so that's 3a over here. So that's it. We plug in whatever the input is asked us to do, and to crank it through the formula and get the output. All right, so 4 times, well, 3a squared, it just means 3a times 3a. And if you remember, that's just 9, and then a times a is a squared. So we have 4 times 9a squared plus, and then 3 times 3a is going to be 9a. Right, so that would be 36a squared plus 9a. Right, so you probably wonder, well, this is not an actual number. Well, it shouldn't be, because, you know, if we have an input is a concrete number or an actual whole number, then our output is going to be a whole number. If our input is a number with a variable, we're expecting that our final answer is going to be an expression. Right, so that's how you do that. Let's move on to the next example. Sometime you may see that, okay, well, let's find f of 3, and I want to subtract that to 8. Okay, well, how do we do this? Well, just like order operation. Okay, so order operation say that follow the Panda method. So in this case, we want to take 8 and minus that from this quantity, whatever that quantity is. Well, that quantity, that notation means, you know, f of 3 has a certain meaning. It means we plug in 3 into the x. Right? Go back to your equation here. Right? And then figure out what that is. So 4 times 9 plus 9, 36 plus 9 is 45. So we take this here and we, plug that back into here. And then now we can do the math. So f of 3 minus 8 now equals, well, f of 3 is 45 minus 8, so that's 37. So our answer in this case is going to be 37. Okay. All right, so